Did she really behave like a diva gone mad on a 2005 Continental flight to Colorado? The Lakewood Church co-pastor and wife of Joel Osteen has been sued by a flight attendant.
The most powerful preacher's wife in America was thrown off a plane over a stain the size of a coin. Victoria Osteen, co-pastor of Lakewood Church, 42,000 people in the pews every Sunday. And in December 2005, she was escorted off a first-class flight before takeoff because a wet spot on her armrest wasn't cleaned fast enough. What came next? A federal fine, a flight attendant suing for over $400,000, a race allegation, and 3 years of courtroom drama that had nothing to do with the gospel. The question nobody could answer: did she do it? Stick with me, because the details inside that cabin will genuinely shock you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. December 2005. Victoria Osteen and her husband Joel board a Continental Airlines flight in Houston, bound for Vail, Colorado. They're seated in first class. There's a small liquid spill on Victoria's armrest. Flight attendant Sharon Brown was working that cabin. According to her testimony, Victoria Osteen didn't just ask for it to be cleaned, she demanded it be addressed immediately and with urgency. When the response wasn't fast enough, the situation deteriorated rapidly. According to Brown's account and the testimony of a second flight attendant, Maria Johnson, Victoria Osteen became verbally abusive, then physically. Brown alleged Victoria grabbed her by the shoulders, elbowed her in the chest, and then attempted to push past crew members toward the cockpit. The Osteens were removed from the plane. The flight was delayed 2.5 hours. She was asked to leave a plane. Not for a safety emergency, not a medical crisis. The Federal Aviation Administration investigated. They fined Victoria Osteen $3,000 for interfering with a flight crew member. Not an allegation. She and her husband Joel are the co-pastors of Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, a converted NBA basketball arena that draws roughly 42,000 people to services every single week. Joel Osteen's television ministry broadcasts across the country and internationally. The Osteens are not just prominent Christians, they are, in many parts of the United States, figures of profound spiritual authority. What they do and how they do it carries weight far beyond a church pew. Because Continental Airlines never called the police at the time of the incident, Sharon Brown said she had no choice but to pursue the matter civilly. She filed a lawsuit in Harris County Civil Court seeking at least $405,000 in damages for physical and emotional suffering. She also requested punitive damages equal to 10% of Victoria Osteen's net worth, a figure the Osteens' legal team declined to ever put on the record. The case sat for nearly 3 years. Then, on August 6, 2008, it went to trial. Defense attorney Rusty Hardin, one of Houston's most recognized trial lawyers, opened by calling the lawsuit exactly what his client believed it to be. His words: "This is nothing more than an attempted extortion." Plaintiff's attorney Reginald McCamey framed the trial differently. He told the jury he hoped the case would prove that, in a courtroom, celebrity status carries no weight. The stage was set. Think about this. If you were a jury member watching both sides open like that, which framing would have caught your attention first? The next morning, August 7th, Maria Johnson took the stand. Johnson was the second flight attendant in the cabin that day, and she testified to something nobody expected. She claimed that Victoria Osteen had singled out Sharon Brown and another attendant not just because of the spill, but because of their race. According to Johnson, Osteen had told Brown she didn't want to deal with her, meaning the 2 black flight attendants, and had pushed past them specifically to speak to Johnson, who Johnson described as the only white woman working that cabin. So, that testimony shifted everything. Whatever this trial had been about up to that moment, it was suddenly about something much larger. Defense attorney Hardin pushed back hard. During cross-examination, he asked Johnson directly when she and Brown's attorney had decided to, in his words, play the race card. He reminded the jury that Lakewood Church's congregation was approximately 1/3 black and 1/3 Hispanic. The allegation, he argued, was not just false, it was reckless. 5 days later, on August 12th, Sharon Brown took the stand herself. She testified that the physical impact of the confrontation had been lasting. She'd had reconstructive breast surgery before the incident, and her attorney argued the blow to her chest had caused genuine harm. She described suffering from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder in the years since. Then came the detail that became the most mocked line of the entire trial. Brown also testified that as a result of the incident, she developed hemorrhoids. Under cross-examination, Hardin pressed on the medical evidence. Doctors, he noted, had found no physical injuries at the time of the incident. Brown had also delayed seeking psychiatric care. And then there was a video deposition from a former Continental colleague named Claudia Hall, who testified that Brown had previously accused her of pushing her into a bathroom wall in a completely separate, unrelated incident. An accusation that, Hall said, never happened. Here's the honest question. When a plaintiff's credibility starts to fracture in cross-examination, does it change how you weigh everything else they said? On August 13th, the final witnesses spoke. 3 first-class passengers who had been on the flight that day testified they had seen and heard nothing, no altercation, no raised voices, no sign of physical force. The plane's captain, Bill Burnett, said in a videotape deposition that he had not even been aware of any alleged assault at the time it was supposedly happening. Then Joel Osteen took the stand. He testified calmly that the assault his wife was accused of simply never occurred. He acknowledged that his wife can be, in his words, expressive, but not violent, not abusive, not the person being described. But here is where the trial took its most quietly significant turn. Sharon Brown testified that in the aftermath of the incident, Joel Osteen had approached her and offered an apology for his wife's behavior. A personal apology. Not through lawyers, not a legal statement, an apology. The Osteens denied any wrongdoing. So what was being apologized for? That detail didn't get resolved in the courtroom, and it never will be. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They answered no to the very first question in the jury charge. Did Victoria Osteen commit an assault against Sharon Brown? And with that single answer, the case was over. Unanimous, not guilty. Jury foreman Gilles Laba spoke to reporters after the verdict. He said, and this is a direct quote, "If we could have figured out a way to return court costs to the Osteens, we would have done it." He called the case a complete waste of time. Outside the courthouse, Victoria Osteen told reporters she was glad it was over and that she'd expected this outcome because, in her words, she knew the truth would hold. Joel Osteen said the verdict was a great vindication and evidence of God's faithfulness. Plaintiff's attorney Reginald McCamey said simply, "We're disappointed." Sharon Brown, the woman whose name was on the lawsuit, who sat through a week of testimony about her credibility, her health, and her motives, gave no public statement. Several questions from this case were never answered inside that courtroom. Why didn't Continental Airlines call law enforcement that day? What exactly was Joel Osteen apologizing for if nothing happened? What does Victoria Osteen's actual net worth look like? A number that never had to enter evidence? And what happened to Sharon Brown's career and life in the years after this verdict? No one has reported on those questions since 2008. Here is what this story actually is, underneath the punchlines and the headlines. A woman with enormous institutional power and a woman without it met in a pressurized cabin over something trivial. By the time it reached a courtroom, it had become a case about race, about faith, about money, about what counts as truth when one side has far more credibility and far more resources than the other. The jury sided with Victoria Osteen. The FAA never reversed its fine. Neither of those things fully resolves what happened on that plane. Because the truth of a moment like that doesn't always survive the journey into a courtroom intact. What it leaves behind isn't a verdict. It's a question. When someone powerful says nothing happened and someone without power says it did, how do we decide who to believe? If this story raised something for you, leave a comment below. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, told the way they actually deserve to be told, and share this with someone who needs to hear it.